like to call the meeting to order. And Mr. Pedro, would you like to say the prayer this evening?
Yes, I will. Loving God, as we come together tonight for the city of Waterville, we pause to ask you to be with us and guide our way. May your spirit of peace surround all we say and do this evening. We ask for your strength and do what is best for the good of Waterville. Lord God, as servants of your people, we pray that you grant us a share of your wisdom. Amen.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mayor Brody?
Yes.
Mr. Rosick?
Here.
Mr. Pedro?
Here.
Mrs. Duncan?
Here. Next, we need approval of the minutes from the regular council meeting November 13th, 2018.
I will move to approve.
Thank you. Second, all right. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain, I wasn't here. Next, we have citizens' comments, and I see one citizen. Does he have any comments? Just tell your wife when you get home. Next, we have our staff reports. Mr. Bagdonis, our administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members have a copy of my report. I don't have anything to add at this point. Certainly later in the meeting, I'll have some agenda-specific comments on some of the other items.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bagdonis? All right, seeing none. Our law director?
No report tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Our finance director? Never disappoints, right?
Evening. Council has a copy of my report, the October 2018 finance report. The end of the month of October, we had an ending balance of $6,651,781. Investment income at the end of October was $40,460. There are two reader reports enclosed, one for October and one for November. October we collected approximately $327,996, which was a little over $18,000 more than we collected in 2017. November's collection was $255,406, which was about $15,000 less than we collected in November of 2017. Year to date, we collected $3,231,802. So that's roughly 93% of what we budgeted for income tax revenue for 2018. We do have 1 month to go, and we're about $236,000 away from our estimate for 2018, which was $3,467,855. So in terms of our RETA collection, we're probably going to be a little short in the month of December. Last year, I believe we were almost at about $200,000, and I would think that's probably what we would collect in December for RETA as well, in the neighborhood of $200,000. One thing I did want to mention is the state of Ohio, they passed House Bill 49, so they gave businesses the opportunity to file net profit, their local net profit income tax returns through the state of Ohio. And I guess in the absence of that law, they would have filed it through RETA. So as of today's date, we've collected about $18,000 through the state of Ohio through the net profit collection. So I guess you might be able to consider that lost revenue that should have went through RETA, but now is coming through the state of Ohio that we're getting. So I guess it just didn't go to RETA; it went to the state of Ohio, and it found its way back to us. So I guess that kind of mitigates the amount of money that we might be a little short this year. So realistically, we're probably going to be a little short by the end of the year in terms of our income tax.
Was the net profit usually in the spreadsheet?
It's not, and it's the first year, really, the first real good year that we've had, the net profit, revenue coming in. Before, it was enacted in 17, and, we got little trickles of money here and there, and I think, maybe we'll add it into the report, or maybe we'll add another report, a net profit report, but I just wanted to mention that, because before 2017, it would have went through Rita.
Meaning it was with
Yeah.
income taxes,
Yeah.
so it was in here, so.
Well, it's not in there for this year.
But in 16, it was in
Right.
the spreadsheet.
Right.
So if you add the 18 in here,
I
that's
think
a
that's
comparable number
I think
to
that's
going backwards.
a realistic,
So actually, we're higher if you look at 16 on here, 3.1, and, I mean, a little bit, I'm just saying. But if, we'll still beat last year if it's 200,000 in December.
Yeah.
Be 3.4. And it could be, right now, we're at 2.93% actual increase over last year. So it'd probably be around that amount if we stay at that number.
yeah,
Which is better than I thought, actually.
we'll be
so.
pretty close, but, I think
depends.
if we do collect around 200,000, we'll be less than a percentage off, 1% off what we thought we were gonna get. So that's probably pretty good, I would
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
So,
Is that 18,000 for the whole year, the net profit tax?
as of this year, as of November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does the state charge a,
Yeah, how's that
Fee.
work?
They do, they charge, a 0.5%. Ironically, about $11,000 of that came last month. So they're not on a regular schedule. They say that they'll have a disbursement every month, but they've only had about 3 or 4 in our case for 2018. So it's very irregular, and but I guess hopefully maybe it'll be on a more regular basis next year. So
I think there was some discussion about making it mandatory, I think, wasn't it, for the state to,
well,
some
right
point
now
or-
it's an option,
It's an option.
and we have a handful of people that I guess take advantage of it. It's more like realtors, architects, waste management. They drive around to different cities, which I guess that would be beneficial to them to just be able to file their local tax and at one place. So those are the type of people that have taken advantage of that. The local companies in Waterville, they do the withholdings and all that, so there's really no need for them to do that through the state.
right, yeah, good. Thanks, John.
Any other questions? Yes.
Mayor, thank you. John, so if we are roughly 1% off on our estimate, if you will, how do we, what's our scorecard on the expenses? Are we, up 1%, down 1%?
I think in terms of our expenses, in terms of our capital expenses, a lot of our expense is gonna come in next year. We're gonna be carrying over that expense to next year. So it's not gonna affect where we are now in terms of our ending balance. I think we should be okay. It's gonna be a fairly small number, and we usually do have unexpended, revenue or expenses that we don't spend the money on. So I think we should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Other questions? Thank you. Next, we have our treasurer, and he is out of town. Communications from council members. Start with Mrs. Duncan.
No report this evening, thank you.
Mr. Pedro.
No report, Mayor?
Mr. Rosie.
I'm speechless.
Me too.
I reserve the right at the end to say something.
There is one other shot, so get thinking.
I have nothing either, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fry.
No report this
All
evening.
right. Mrs. Bruno.
No report, thank you.
Mr. Bruno.
No report, Mayor.
All right. I do have one thing. Every year, we appoint two council people to the Volunteer Firefighters Dependents Fund Board. And currently, it's Mr. Pedro and Mrs. Bruno. So I would like to make a motion to appoint them again for this year.
Second?
All right. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then they will need to meet.
I was just gonna mention that the annual meeting of that group, this year will be December 10th, which is the night of our next council meeting at 7:15.
Okay.
And the purpose of that meeting is to appoint the citizen member. It's a 5-member group, 2 from council, 2 from the fire association, and then those 4 individuals then convene to pick a 5th member. And the Ohio Revised Code says there must be a meeting within a certain window of time each year to take care of that business.
So Mr. Pedro and Mrs. Bruno will need to be 15
Yes.
minutes early and select
Okay.
the citizen to join them.
And the citizen who was on last year has agreed to serve another year despite the fact that it's a huge time commitment for him.
Thank God.
Hopefully, right?
Yes, we hope that group
Minimal.
never meets other than the
Yeah.
one mandatory
Yes.
meeting a year.
Yes.
Thank you for serving. All right, next we have executive session for consideration of a personnel issue, Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1, appointment compensation of public employees or officials, and we need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mayor Brody?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Pedro?
Yes.
Mrs. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Rosen?
Yes.
Way too much paper with me.
I'm coming.
I know, interesting. Fix those back there. Does that feel good?
We need anything,
Can I
right?
get your chair?
No. Absolutely not. Tell her all the times that John helped you and how he helps everyone.
Council table down, which is, and the light goes up. Unless Lori, do you want the mics around? I mean, it should be, is it your phone that keeps ringing? Yeah. Like even I can hear voice, well, from the microphones, I can hear voices coming through that, from the speakers. And I don't know.
Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
Yeah. Some, I mean. Because these are working. It's working too. I can turn the recorder off.
used to have that seat.
Yeah.
I used to sit by Joe Bethler down there.
Joe, good old Joe.
I miss Joe. What's there? Yeah, that's the old one. Oh, wait, I didn't make a copy of that. I just needed to do it after the meeting. I'll just lay it here so I don't forget. All right, we need a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved?
Second. Roll call, please.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes. Under old business, we have the formation of a union cemetery district. And do we have any new comments on that? I know you haven't met again yet.
No. We have a couple items later in the agenda on that topic, but there have
Nothing
been
on
no
this.
other meetings, and there's really no new information at this time.
All righty. Any comments for the council to bring? Nope. All right, ordinance 23-18 is an ordinance accepting the annexation of the territory proposed for annexation by petition filed by Philip L. Dombey, agent Miller Browning, on July 11th, 2018 with the Lucas County Board of Commissioners. First reading was November 13th, 2018. Second reading is scheduled for tonight, November 26th. Third reading and legislative action is scheduled for December 13th, 2018. Any comments this evening on that discussed at our last meeting? Seeing none. Move on to a public hearing for resolution 60-18. This is a resolution approving and adopting the City of Waterville fiscal year 2019 5-year capital planning program for all municipal funds and departments. And I'll open the public hearing. There's quite a bit of public here this evening. And council has anything, I'll let Jim start.
Thank you, Mayor. What I usually like to do at this time is, if you look at page 1 of the 5-year capital document, it's called Recommendations for 5-Year Capital Program Policies. And these were formally adopted by council back in 2006, but they've served us very well over time, and I'd just like to kind of refresh everyone's memory on some of these concepts. First one is, of course, we each year evaluate the historical trends in our income tax revenue, and we try to be conservative but accurate in projecting income tax revenue over our 5-year planning period. And you've heard Mr. Golkenauer talk about this year, and for next year we're projecting a 1% increase. We also, besides trying to be conservative on the revenue side, we also try to be conservative on the expenditure side. And although it can vary, we separate the income tax 75% to the general fund for operating and 25% to the capital improvement fund. For the annual expenditures, number 2, we set a maximum of 115% of the estimated income tax revenue, and that allows us to move the expenditures forward. And if the revenue exceeds our projections, we're prepared to advance projects, because a lot of these do take quite a bit of advanced planning. So if the revenues don't come in as we expect, for most projects we can delay them or scale them back. And a lot of times it's much more difficult to accelerate a project, especially if it's a construction project. So the 115%, sometimes we refer to that as over-programming. That is also served well. If we can, number 3, we delay certain capital expenditures until the 3rd and 4th quarters of the budget year, and that way we take a look at the revenues and other expenditures and make sure that we feel that things are coming in sufficiently to be able to act on those capital expenditures based on the revenue that we've gotten in that budget year. If things are not, then we can delay them to the following year if necessary. Number 4 is, we recognize that major items, may need to be financed over a period longer than 5 years, or if something comes up unexpectedly that we can't accommodate within the 5-year capital program, we may need to incur debt. And we always include the annual debt service for items like that in the 5-year capital program. And then number 5, and we have been able to do this most of the last few years, if funds are available in the operating budget or the general fund, we allow for a transfer from the general fund to the 5-year capital fund, excuse me, to supplement our 25% of the income tax revenue. So those are kind of the overarching policies that we look at when we put together the 5-year capital program. In this 5-year capital, there really are not many changes in the next 4 years. Of course, 2023 is the year that's been added. One exception to that would be the Canopy wireless water meter reading system. And we've added that because we have the opportunity, and we've applied for a grant and a loan through the Ohio Public Works Commission. And if we're successful in that application, we would be prepared to go forward with that in 2019. So that's a fairly significant item that has not been previously in the 5-year capital program. With that, since there really haven't been many changes, and we had a lot of discussion last year on some of the items, and this program reflects the decisions that council made at that time. So I guess I'll try to answer any questions that council members may have.
All right. Questions or comments? Yep.
Mayor and John, or not John, you're Jim. When can we decide, I guess, after we get more information, but are we able to adjust that 75-25%? I know that we do a good job, it's good fiscal planning, but I think that sooner than later, we're gonna need to revisit our roads and the allocation of funds. And I'm wondering if that's the place to start. And maybe it's a 1 or 2 year change in the formula. And I know you told me this before, but help me remember, for every 5% that you change the percentage, what does that generate in actual income or funds to expend? So in other words, we went from 75 to 25, and we went, instead of putting 25% in the capital, we put 15%, so there's 10% more that we could allocate to another line item. You understand that
Well, there's
question?
more than one question in there.
So I'm allowed to do
Talking
that.
about the split.
The first part of the question is, the 75-25 is set by ordinance. So council can change that by the passage of another ordinance. And we have done that in the past. Actually, we went the opposite way that you're referring to. We put more into the general fund than we did into the 5-year capital, and that was probably in 08, 09, 10,
Yep.
when money from the state of Ohio was cut way back, and we had the recession, or whatever you would want to call it. And I refer to the 75-25 as the default provision, but council at any time, by the passage of an ordinance, can change that either temporarily or permanently to whatever percentage you're comfortable with. The difficulty with increasing the amount into the capital fund is obviously there's less for operations, and with the decrease in money from the state, our local government fund has been cut 50%. We've talked about that many times before. That represents about $250,000 or $300,000. And other revenues have been flat, even flatter than our income tax. So whatever money you take from the general fund is less money for operations. And also, if you reduce that year-end balance from one year to the next, when it comes time to borrow money in the notes, that's one of the main items that the financial folks look at and determine our interest rate based on the risk factor. And the smaller our general fund balance, they perceive that as greater risk, and you pay a higher interest rate. So we've been doing that to some extent, although not by changing the percentage. The years that we have added transfers from the general fund over and above the 25%, we've supplemented that 25% in that way, and that actually is a more flexible way for council to put additional money in the capital fund than setting a hard and fast percentage.
Okay.
For example, this year, the transfer from the general fund to the 5-year capital is $150,000. So over and above the 25% income tax, we transferred $150,000.
For next, you're talking this year, right? Next year's
Yes,
hundred and
in 18.
forty.
Right.
What's the advance in? Is that the water?
Advance, that's where,
Is that the one we're paying with?
yes,
Okay.
What was the advance in? I had that.
It's the water.
that's in the water fund, in the water capital fund.
Advance
We
we
advanced
paid
money this year, so it gets paid back next year.
Okay, so that's just moving it from where?
That's kind of
Back and forth.
like canceling, from one budget year to the next, it cancels itself out.
You have more?
I'm good, thank you.
Did that answer it, Mr.
Yes,
Peter?
On the recommendations, and on number 4, the debt, the borrowing, is there a limit that we have on how much we would ever borrow, or is it based on what the debt service would be, or is it just
We decided.
we decide it as we go?
You mean a limit, like borrow 10%?
Do we have a maximum that we would ever be willing to borrow? I guess that's the question.
From notes, bonds?
Yes, and it's based on the valuation of all the property in the city, and we're far, far from that.
Way under that.
Yeah.
And I know staff has heard the message loud and clear over time from both council and the finance committee.
Mayor.
The mayor's smiling.
There's only one more year this way.
One big goal is to reduce the amount of our debt.
Yeah.
And
We've
I
done
think
it. We've done it, yeah.
We've done that. We've heard the message, we've done that.
Yep. Use assets longer. That's my motto. But, yeah, so we can, to answer that question, one time I had finance committee look at what percent we were compared to other people. This was quite a while ago. And we were in a good spot. There wasn't any magic formula. I mean, it's what you'd be comfortable with because you're council deciding it. There's no law on what. Well, obviously, if you do too much, I'm sure the auditor will come in. But we did discuss that in depth. It was probably 10 years ago. But we had a lot more debt at that time,
Yeah,
long term,
it's
big debt.
it's a good
Yeah.
policy to pay
Yeah.
it down.
Yeah.
And I have one simple question, and that is, comparing last year to this year, last year we included a budget item for new chairs in chambers, and I wonder where that stands.
We're pricing out the chairs. That's one of those items that we did put off till the end of this year to make sure that revenue was sufficient, but I know Mr. Blair has some price quotations for that, so he's working on that, and I think with the way things stand, we're planning on probably authorizing that purchase before the end of the year. Mr. Goldkenauer has to pick the color, though.
Oh, yeah. Gotta go with the wine. Red and gray. I wanted to talk about, I'm sure we discussed this last year, but there's some new items in the fire. And I guess I'll just say, I'm okay with leaving it. I'm torn because we need to finish up. The gentleman at the Fire Chiefs Association said it would be a little bit until he got our information together, but he has all the info for the fire district to analyze. So I'm expecting that in December or January. And I know it wouldn't be real quick, but I don't think it'll be as slow as people think if that's the route we go. So there will be some analysis on the equipment needs in that data and for the size of our area geographically and population-wise. So I guess I would ask before we spend a lot on some of the larger items that we really take into consideration if we get that analysis back in January. It'd be nice to know. So this is just a planning document. These things do not have to be purchased if the council decides not to. Just always remember that it's in here. It's a flowing one. It changes year to year. Some things stay pretty common, but I do know we probably added a little bit in 19, like we didn't have rescue task force outfits because that's kind of a new thing with, unfortunately, with active shooters and whatnot. But we've had a couple new items in there. I don't know if the cardiac monitors, they might have all been in there, but we had moved the police chief, or the fire chief's vehicle. So that year is a little more expensive, starting in 19. The reserves for that, we can still set aside the pumper reserves because that's just setting the money aside, which is a good idea. So I think that's a great idea, but that's in the following year, the 400,000 of the $500,000. So just something for council to consider. We will need equipment, but it will be nice to have the analysis to see what everybody has, mostly White House and ourselves, because obviously we take care of the township right now, and so we'll be the two main players in that. So.
I think you bring up an excellent point with the fire department, not just in 19, but in all the years,
Yeah.
that that's very much up in the air depending on the outcome of the fire district study.
Exactly.
And I doubt very much if staff would or council would allow staff to run out and purchase these items in the
Yeah.
first quarter of 2019.
Exactly. So I'm just reiterating it as part of my job. So because if you add them together, it's 225. I'm just estimating 431,060, 22,018, 8. I mean, generally they are our highest. The years I've been doing this, their assets are more expensive with fire trucks and whatnot than other areas like police cars. So that's where most of your debt is. If you guys look at the spreadsheet that we maintain on our assets and our debt and what we're paying off. So fire stations have been the most expensive. Fire trucks, one was almost $1 million, the ladder truck. Second one they purchased since I've been here. The first one was a used one. Pumper trucks, we use those more often. I'm not sure the current chief, if he used the ladder truck more, but I think he did a lot. But the pumper trucks were the bigger deal. So back in the day, they were 400,000 10 years ago. And I had said at the time, purchase more of those if that's what went out to the fires. They hold more water or something, I don't know. So I know the chief isn't here to answer some of these, but we'll just take it with the study coming in, and the staff will obviously do what they always do and wait and see how it goes. But just be aware that there's a lot of items, and this is generally your biggest expense because, you know, the administration doesn't have to buy that big of assets except software, which isn't even close. But I mean, this is where you spend most of your money. So these are the assets you really have to think about when to buy them. Not should we all buy them, but, you know, when the timing's right. Any other comments on the fire? It's kind of a tough one since we're studying it right now.
Exactly.
I like having it on paper so we know what they're looking towards, but. All right, any other departments?
Just
And
police,
we
I
can-
know we always talk about the unwritten rule, or at some point we talk about buying a car a year to not get behind, but we have bought 7 cars in the past 3 or 4 years, so I'm hoping we can skip a couple of years. I know they did skip a couple of years in the plan. I'll be curious to see what the mileage is on the cars and where we really are with those cars.
And the next one isn't until 2020, so that would be a good question for council to take a look at it again. Yeah. And they really have nothing else except the mobile computers are pretty costly, but they have to be updated.
Yeah.
Sounds like the technology's changing. So really has nothing else in there, but I agree, Mary, to see where they are and see how big the town is getting or how the mileage is going.
Before we start,
Yeah.
Don't we normally get that report showing all the vehicles and the mileage and?
Is it on here?
like,
yeah,
is it
it's
in
usually
here?
the last page
It's
on
in
the
there?
Yes, on there.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Page 56.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I just wanna make sure that we, you know, we have the most up-to-date version on the day that we're going to decide if that's gonna happen.
Yeah,
I know
for
we
sure.
still have our motorcycle, which I don't understand, but that's okay. And the bikes, I think we
7
spent some
bikes.
money on bikes.
Yeah.
I hope they get used.
Let's sell 'em. So that's the police. Any other questions on different, since we're in the public hearing, different departments or areas?
So on the, I'm jumping to the water capital, and you had mentioned the meter,
The meters?
radio read units and so forth.
Mhm.
And those numbers did go up considerably from last year's budget, but
Right.
Yes.
does the budgeted amount include the grant, reduction for grants, or is this the total amount?
Well, of course, this is the expenditure, so this is the total expenditure. When we get to the operating budget, we'll have the total expenditure number in there. On the revenue side, we'll have the grant and the loan.
Right.
And even though they're water meters, we pay for them half out of water capital, half out of sewer capital, because they really are, I call them the cash registers for the sewer fund too.
And we don't know what the grant will be at this point.
Well, we've applied. We should know in the next month whether we're successful on it. I don't remember those numbers right off the top. Well, I probably have that here.
Yeah, I guess that would adjust our budget based on,
Well, I think we would probably, if we are not successful with the grant alone, we would probably scale back
right,
On the number.
the project and not do it all in 1 year.
right, spread it over.
So we vote on this on the 28th of January?
The capital,
The last several years, council has voted on the 5-year capital at the same meeting you voted on the operating budget. They've kind of been a package.
okay. Yeah, so you can, bring up other items before then, and once you look at the operating too.
Yeah.
Okay, the grant would be roughly $64,000, and the 0% interest loan would be about $96,000 of that total.
And it was 277
77.
times 2, I think, for the,
Right.
Yeah.
so the rest is coming from the budget then.
Correct. And the grant and the loan numbers are based on our calculations to maximize our point total for our application.
Right.
Because there are 15 pages of criteria, and some of it's based on percentages and some are based on total dollars, so everybody knows what the criteria is ahead of time, so you tailor your application, try and maximize your scoring. It's very competitive.
Any other comments, questions?
I had a question,
Yep.
Under the police budget, the women's locker room upgrade. I noticed that was a $15,000 cost to that. I didn't know if it was so high because we were building another restroom, or what the cost could be lowered on that by coming up with a different configuration maybe.
Actually, that's pretty modest for the work
Is it?
we're gonna be doing.
Okay.
We have an existing restroom there, and there are 3 rooms over there. One is a property room, one is a current locker room that has no plumbing in it at all. And we're shifting the property room into the locker room. The property room is adjacent to the other existing restroom, and then we're cutting a door in between the existing restroom and what today is the property room will become the female locker room.
So the major cost there is the plumbing.
No, because we're really not doing that much plumbing. We're using the existing restroom to the greatest extent we can, but we're cutting another door through a block wall. There's some lighting work to do, and some doorways get reconfigured, so really it's maximizing the space that we've got. And if we were doing new plumbing work, we'd have several times that amount of money in the remodeling.
Okay.
Anything else this evening? Seeing none, nothing, all right, gonna close the public hearing. We'll revisit that if we need to. Next, we have resolution 62-18, a resolution approving the appointment of John D. Gokenauer as municipal administrator for the city of Waterville and authorizing an employment agreement by and between the city of Waterville and John D. Gokenauer. And so this would appoint our new administrator starting in January. And we would need a first motion and a second.
So moved?
Second?
All right, any questions or discussions on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Congratulations. All right, next we have new business. We have a referral to the Planning Commission, rezoning of 11 North River Road from a C2, Commercial 2 to R2. And Mr. Bagnos, would you like to give a little background on that?
Yes, thank you. You're probably very familiar with what used to be the gas company's office on North River Road. This is the small house that's directly north of that property. It also had been owned by the gas company, and both the office building and this house were donated by the gas company to the Waterville Historical Society. And I understand that their plan is to sell the house and retain the office building. And that entire block is zoned commercial, and so they've made application to rezone it residential. And so the first step in that process would be for council to refer that request to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission meets a week from tonight.
All right. We need a motion
I'll move to approve,
or to refer.
or to refer.
Yep.
Second.
I'll move to approve the referral.
Okay. You got it.
I'll second.
All right. Any questions on that this evening?
Jim, if I could, just, we have an overlay, we have a plan, I know it's a guide, but how many residentials could there be in that area if this goes through? Are there others?
Well, we're only talking about one property, but I think there would be concern in zoning one property residential, an entire block that's commercial. Actually, a few years ago, we had another request to zone a property in the same block from commercial to residential. The Planning Commission recommended against it, and council ultimately, well, council, I think, was not in favor of it either. The property owner applicant ended up withdrawing the application. But I think we're gonna have a lot of the same concerns with this request.
So I guess my question is, if council feels that's the way this might end up, why do we go through this exercise? Because I think we're giving some people some false hope, although we're following the plan that's in the book. But I mean, maybe things will change. But if we've got an area, because we got the Park District down, the Parker Square, and we got some other things going on, if it doesn't fit, and I like the Historical Society, but if it doesn't fit the plan, then I think they're gonna go through some time and energy, perhaps expenses, and if it's like it was a couple years ago, we'll be at the same table. So, council, if you have some comment, Barb, you agreeing or
You look
disagreeing?
inquisitive.
Yes.
Very inquisitive, very concerned. No,
Mayor, I'm sorry I took the podium
well,
from you.
I mean, in older sections of town, I mean, I think you're gonna see some mixed zoning like that, right? I mean, do you see that just in old towns? You got some residential and commercial, and is it a problem? I guess I'm just wondering that. What would be the potential problem of that?
Well, a couple things. it probably would be what's referred to as spot zoning. And if you put a residence in the middle of other commercial, sometimes the activities of the commercial businesses aren't compatible with someone living there, and you generate complaints.
But you live next door to a quarry, or you live next door to the
Well, yes,
river, or you live
similar.
next door to, kinda know
I
that,
think
right?
our central business district is fairly small to begin with, and the more property you take out of the potential of commercial uses, the less chance you have of getting to a critical mass that you would like to have for businesses to kind of support each other and generate the customer traffic that has that synergy. I realize one property is only one property, but then you set a precedent, and where do you stop there? This house is in very poor condition. It hasn't been lived in for many, many years. I wonder if somebody is going to put money into remodeling it, you could just as easily remodel it into an office type use. And it may actually have more value than as a single family residence.
Well, let's look at the block. I mean, there's other residential properties
Across the
in.
street.
They're
right
not
across the
conforming uses.
There's no issue there, though. I mean, well, I guess,
Well, they've been used in a non-conforming way, so they have that, or you might refer to it as grandfather. Once a property has been, if the grandfathered use or the non-conforming use has not occurred for 2 years, it loses that non-conforming status.
okay.
So this property has been lived in for much longer than 2 years, so it no longer has any sort of grandfather or non-conforming status.
And it's been vacant for quite some time.
Yes, it's been vacant, and before that, the gas company used it more or less as a warehouse.
Yeah.
Their overflow, I think.
Okay.
Is it possible, whoever made the motion, to withdraw that and table this, and then perhaps we could talk about what are some of the options, or should we proceed down that path, or should we just table it for?
Well, you have the planning commission
send
to
it to
use
the
their
planning commission.
expertise, I mean, about planning and zoning, I mean, that's kind of their job, for us to get advice. We don't always vote the
Okay.
same as what they give us back, we don't have to do that. They're
Right.
just a,
This is just referral to the planning
Recommendation.
Well,
commission.
and they're the
but,
ones that
but
should be
they have
hearing
been,
it anyhow,
they should
right?
hear it, I think. I
Okay.
don't know if other people feel differently, I think they should hear it and
I
give their
assume
opinion.
the planning commission will consider all these, I mean, you raised very valid
Yeah.
points, so the.
And maybe go to that meeting, I think it wouldn't be bad to.
All right.
They
then-
will, and they actually considered a lot of those things when this other property came up. And it's always possible that the property owner, may see the way the tide is flowing after the planning commission, they may withdraw the request after
Okay.
that, like the other property owner ended up doing too.
Okay, good conversation.
This is between the Columbian House then and the, gas company.
No,
No.
it's
Between
after
the
the
gas
gas company
company
and.
Yeah, the Columbian House, gas company, then this house. This
Yeah.
is the
Oh,
house
okay.
that's
It's got a front
directly
porch.
north
North
of
of the gas.
the gas
By
company.
Smoke and Fire.
So is this between where the gas company used to be and their garage area? Those?
Tan one, yeah,
There's several
Right next to
properties
it.
before you get to the garage.
it's a
Okay.
little brown house.
No,
Oh, the import.
I mean the one where there's like a garage below and
The
living
gas
quarters.
company garage is
Yeah.
what they call it, yeah.
Okay.
There's a garage on the first floor and there's an apartment or two on the
But
second
this is
floor.
the house right next to where the gas company used to be.
They're a
Yes.
two-story office building.
Right, okay.
Okay.
And I guess we'll also pass along some of the comments and concerns the council has to the applicant, and they can ponder that as well.
Right, okay, thank you.
Well, and so if it comes back to the council, the planning commission recommends it, council needs a supermajority to overrule the planning commission, is that still accurate? I believe so. At least 5 votes. Rather
mean
than
if they don't
4,
agree?
we would need, yeah.
That's an interesting legal question.
Yes.
Because
I
there have been
recall
some
that.
court cases on that, because, depending on the planning commission recommendation and the vote of council, there could be circumstances that the zoning gets changed with a minority of council voting that way, and that has been held, I think, to, not be the legal way of doing it, so, yes, you are correct,
I
but it
remember having it a
depends on
couple
which
times.
way the votes go.
Right.
Now, in the last case, the planning commission did, recommend against the rezoning.
The house next to this house.
Well, it's a couple of properties north.
And then in that case, council could still vote to approve it, and they would need just a regular majority, not a supermajority. So-
Well, no, I think that's the
Oh, they
case
would-
where you would need, I
super
think, at least 5 votes.
I think you're right. Yep.
Yeah, so we do have to be careful what goes to the planning commission, because they do have
The
a
votes.
little power with
Yeah,
what comes
yeah.
back to council.
Yep.
We do have to consider that, so to Tim's point,
Yes.
but
Right
But
now
in
it
this
is
case, I'm
C2, and I think, has anyone spoken to the Historical
Nope,
Society?
good. I'm
So, I mean, it could possibly be sold commercially too, right? I mean, I don't know if they've attempted
Absolutely.
that, is my
Mhm.
question to them. Have you attempted a commercial sale? Have you, you know,
well, their intention, do we know their intentions? They probably just wanna rent
they
it.
want to sell it.
No,
Oh, they wanna sell it
they
as a
say that they
residential
have
property.
a prospective buyer.
They want to sell it.
That's what's
to
And
someone.
probably rent it. I mean,
Oh, the person buying it.
Right.
Possibility.
That I don't know.
we don't know their intentions.
But they want to actually sell it.
I thought the
Money.
person that was gonna buy it wants to live there. Is that what we heard, or?
They had a showing, and, a young person was thinking about buying it, and then they didn't know the interesting backstory to this property, so they backed off. They weren't made aware that it was commercial by the realtor, not the property owner. but-
Oh, I hadn't heard that part of it.
And, you know, we mentioned to them what it was zoned and, you know, different things like that, so, advise them to let the process move forward and see if it's rezoned or not, because they can't live there as a residence.
Right, right. And of course, the property taxes are more expensive with the higher zoning, C2 versus R2, right? Commercial is gonna be more expensive than residential, right?
Sometimes.
Oh, sometimes, not
Right,
always.
I can't imagine the value of this property being that high,
that high.
to make
Oh.
that big a
Yeah.
difference right now.
Usually just commercial sells higher though, you're right.
This property doesn't even have its own water tap. The water comes off of the gas company building right now.
Well, they have to separate that out and pay the
Yes.
tap fee, which
Yes.
that will be expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that work on Third Street?
Now, are they aware of that? Yeah.
Pardon me?
Well, how does that work on Third Street? Because you have people renting above businesses.
Well, in
What's that?
C2, you're allowed to have residences on the second
Above.
floor of the commercial buildings.
It's kind of set up that way.
That is it's either a permitted or conditional use in C2.
But not on the first floor,
But not on the first
where
floor.
business goes on.
And I think the concept is you want the first floor more or less reserved for business purposes, for the reasons I've already mentioned.
Okay,
Yep.
very good.
And all those other properties were there prior to the zoning change, as far as the residentially used
Yes,
property.
and they've been in use for that purpose without a 2-year break.
Got it.
So as long as they're not vacant for 2 years or longer, they maintain that grandfather status.
Thank you.
This would be the only residential
Think about it.
zoning on that block, on that side of the
On
street?
that side,
Yes,
on that side.
What about that White House?
it's zoned
Next to
commercial.
Waterville Import?
Everything is zoned commercial on that side of the block.
Next to
There's
Waterville
people that
Import?
live there.
Yes.
Well, because
Right,
the
you know.
city
Just
had
like
to
on
kick
Third
them
Street,
out.
there's houses across from the post office.
Right.
And that's zoned commercial, and those are non-conforming.
But they've been
in existence.
Well,
been existed before.
Wasn't that a funny story, though? Didn't they have some kind of like sign, bogus sign in front of the window?
On Third?
Yeah, well, next
No,
to
that was on
Waterville
River Road.
Imports.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And they were living there, but they put this bogus business sign up
Well, we were told
because
they
it wasn't
weren't
really a
living there.
business. Huh?
We were told they weren't living there.
I know, but we knew they were.
So all you need is, oh my goodness.
The law director was involved in some potential enforcement action in that case.
All right, so
Funny.
we have a motion and a second to refer this. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Raise your hand. All right. we will wait what they meet before us next meeting, so we should hear. All right, next we have a request for contract time extensions on Michigan Avenue Water Line Replacement Phase 2, Great Lakes Demolition Company. And Mr. Bagnos, do you have an update on the project?
Yes. You have some information in your packet, and the contractor has been working pretty diligently on this project. They did run into, especially up on Michigan Avenue, some unforeseen utility conflicts, and then there were some weather conditions that slowed down their work. You see a letter from the contractor and the engineer, and they're asking for an extension until December 24th for the bulk of the work, and then until May 1st of next year for the seating. And staff would concur with those recommendations and recommends approval of those requests.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any questions on this one?
There's no penalty for any
Well, there
Just
would
like
be
a
if you
delay.
don't approve
We
the
don't
extension.
extend it,
but the delay was caused by
whether.
weather or other.
Weather and unforeseen utilities. Michigan Avenue is very crowded with underground utilities, and gas line especially was not quite where anyone thought it was.
Interesting.
So quick question,
And we have water main.
so in the past, when we've had contractors that had, what is that, liquidated damages? What's it
Yes.
called? They neglected to request a time extension, and that would have waived that from them? And
No, I think
discussions with them?
we look at it on a case-by-case basis, and in some of the past contracts, there was some question, did the contractor, and in some of our intersection jobs where they had to order equipment, did they order the equipment in a timely fashion, or did they wait 3 months and then place the order, and then the delivery was late? So that's why we do look at each case individually, and in this case, we don't feel that the contractor should be held at fault for this. There were things beyond the contractor's control, whereas in other cases, the contractor might have been busy on another job and just didn't work here for several weeks, or the equipment was not ordered timely. So we try to be fair in all cases, and if the contractor has diligently pursued the work, we recommend that they be granted a little leeway if we think that there are circumstances that maybe they didn't prosecute the work in a timely fashion. We try to hold them accountable for that.
Are they done now? When I drove up there, I saw, today I didn't see anybody up there.
The underground work is pretty much done. They have what I would call restoration work they still have to do.
Will there be any change request with the additional work that arose and they had to obtain the materials? So the additional work, they had to do something they didn't foresee. Is there going to be additional cost?
They're still sorting through the change orders, and there will be some credits on items too. For
Do you
example,
foresee it being big or?
I don't know at this point. I don't think it's gonna be
Okay.
huge. It may be
All right.
a bit more, but they had a problem right there near the electronic message sign where about 2 weeks ago, a chunk of the new water line blew out and caused a substantial leak. And I think that's between the contractor and the pipe supplier as to whether there was a defect in the pipe from the factory or was it damaged during installation.
So they'll be
That's not
taking
our
care of
issue,
that.
but we have calculated the amount of water that we lost,
Okay.
and we had some overtime by our public works people, so we will be getting credit for that.
That
and
wasn't the
change order
only
too.
additional work though, right?
No.
Okay.
And
All right.
the phones rang quite a bit, I understand, because there was, of the water main break, the water was colored for a few days.
Well, not just the water line break, when they installed the line and they they have to fill the line and flush it. So when you draw water into a new pipe like that, you're pulling water in different directions through the existing system, and so the velocity and the direction of flow may change from what it normally is, and that stirs up sediment in the existing line. So yes, we did have some discoloration in certain parts of town. The water was always safe, and we just advise people to let things run for a minute or two until
And
it
was
clears
fine.
up.
Yeah.
All
Do we
right,
hold the final payment then until the grass starts to grow, or what do we
Just
do?
a
Well,
portion.
there will be an amount withheld to cover that, yes.
all right, we have a motion and a second, I believe. Yep, all right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, we have Resolution 63-18, a resolution authorizing the municipal administrator to enter into an amendment to the cemetery services agreement and property use license with Waterville Township for the maintenance, care, and operation of Wakeman Cemetery. Mr. Bagdones, do you have an update on that?
Yes, thank you. We've discussed this a bit at past meetings. And at our joint meeting in White House, Waterville Township requested a contribution of $2,500 each from the Village of White House and the City of Waterville to help them through the end of this calendar year with the cemetery expenses. We did get a formal written request from the township on that. In our case, the existing cemetery services agreement does not foresee any separate additional payments such as this, so this resolution would authorize that amendment, which would allow us to make a separate lump sum payment to the township as they have requested.
All right, we need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And last, we have a request from Waterville Township, a $2,500 contribution for 2018 cemetery expenses. We would need a motion.
I'll move.
Second.
Any other discussion on that? I know you discussed it at the last meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And I just mentioned, under other information, we did get back from the police department, based on a comment at the last meeting, their policy that they already had, I believe, and there is a complaint form, citizen complaints against an employee. So hopefully everybody took a look at that, and I don't know if you had any questions or information. I just wanted to point out that. That's on our website too, right? That form should be.
I don't
have a
think this
question.
form is on the website.
That would be a good one, I guess, to have on there.
It's not, but, I can wait till Chief LaGrange is back. I just have some questions
About this?
about
Yeah,
that, yeah.
we might have to answer them. Next meeting, someone will be here,
Yes.
possibly him.
Yes.
All right. All right, any other information? Tim? No? All right, we'll need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yes.
Okay, so our next meeting